So in the second part of the video, what I want to go over is the 2018 prompt now, which arguably is way stronger writing, not because of, I think, student differences, but more so of the reading choices they gave. For Gandhi's piece, it was really pathos-based and very singular messaged, I want to say. Whereas in this particular speech, Albright gives a more nuanced and rhetorically complex work compared to Gandhi's. So I think it's more so that the students of the two different years differed in their qualities. Arguably, yeah, like the 2019 one with Gandhi's was way harder to write just because of how little you could work with. Not very diverse in terms of rhetorical choices. But anywho, in this piece, we'll look at this student's work and how they earned a 6 out of 6. So I won't go over the context because assumingly you've read it already, but things we can use for an intro paragraph. Number one, we can deal with the ethos of Albright. She is the United States Secretary of State, so it definitely gives her a lot of personality, a lot of influence, as well as the kairos of the situation. It's a graduation, so it's designed for young people who are ambitious, who are basically moving to the next step of their lives, hopefully making change in the world. And then number two, we also consider is that it's a woman-centered speech because it's a women's college in Massachusetts. So we definitely have a couple of topics coming in mind: women's rights, woman, and the systemic uh, prejudice that they face, and all that there. And again, unlike Gandhi's letter, which is more personal, one-on-one to a singular reader, it's for a wider audience. So we have to consider now what are some strategies she employs to change and direct her delivery. So for the first paragraph, the student does a really good job establishing premise, meaning that they talk a lot about things that might inspire or encourage or dictate the direction of the speech. And it deals a lot with how women had voting rights in the past, um, the fight for that and all that, but still not as much progress as desired. So in this case, student further mentions glass ceiling, which is a sophisticated point. That's a term that we see in sociology. So for an AP reader, we already think, okay, this person has some good prior knowledge that they can incorporate along with the rhetorical analysis. And then for three and four, I kind of merge them together because it deals with the thesis and how specific it is. If you look at the thesis in the very last line there, it's broken into two parts. The first half is just all the different points that the author will observe and examine regarding Albright's speech, and it looks like it's almost like topic sentence bullet points that really help guide us as we follow along the essay. And then lastly, the student even goes into talking about the purpose that the author has regarding all these choices. And what is a good choice that the student does is they add a little bit of voice and tone, which we'll observe here and there in this piece. Because you can look at the last line there, they write and that they will succeed. So they even add a little bit of commentary and assessment on their own regarding the work that they're dealing with. And that's good because it shows a sophisticated voice. First body paragraph is pretty in depth and dense, so we'll talk lightly in terms of what is being done overall. So first and foremost, we'll look at her topic sentence. Albright begins by presenting her audience with America's accomplishments and continued work in this growing world. So it's just more of a statement, and it goes chronologically as to what Albright's speech will look like. But author does a really good job transitioning the usage of all these allusions to major achievements and accomplishments and so forth into the hypothetical choice of not pursuing change. So in this case, it's almost like we've done all this. We could stop, right? No, we never stop. This is what America and Americans have always been doing. We always push for more and more, and never excluding and always considering the possibilities. So the third point I've given here gives encouragement to audience to want to contribute to the greater good considering the premise of the argument, right? Because uh, I can't really pinpoint right now because my cursor doesn't show up, but it's more towards the end of this paragraph where um, the student writes, Albright does not do this once. She does it underlying 5 times. The Berlin Wall, nuclear weapon, Bosnia, a world economy, and last but not least, women's rights. She includes women's rights last to reveal that this urge to push onwards is not confined to America, but to also her audience, a class of women with the potential to bring about change. And so the author does a really smart job layering this paragraph, talking about the illusions, talking about the implications of the illusions, but then finally going to the transition of But wait, this is where you come in, the audience, and the author recognizes that and now brings the listeners into the conversation here. So overall, it's a good use of illusion, but also a good use of considering how audience is being used. In the next body paragraph, author has another good topic sentence contrasted with the 2019 one. This author has way more complex topic sentences. This one writes, Albright, having gotten the gears and minds of the audience turning on what they maybe can do regarding women's rights, follows up with a series of personal anecdotes of what women across the world are doing. So we know that this entire paragraph is dealing with the divisive anecdotes, but more so two other things that are really complex. One, it transitions from the previous paragraph, right? The gears in the mind are turning already. And two, it gives a call to action of what the woman in this audience can do in inspiration by the other woman of presidents of the past and so forth here. And so the author goes into all these different examples of women in other countries and circumstances, but they don't just like overquote. They simply just paraphrase all the examples they need to. And even that, they don't go super in depth because they don't need to do so. They already mentioned all the different anecdotes and all that. A few examples to simply prove the point. Rather, what this author does a lot is towards the last two-thirds of this paragraph, if you'll read it, it deals a lot with the intentions of all these anecdotes and these examples here. It deals a lot with how the author thinks this would influence the listener, and at the same time, what Albright's intentions were in giving all these anecdotes. And even paints the images of what these other women in other countries go through so that we, the AP readers, will feel a little bit of pathos, I guess, in hearing these anecdotes retold by this author here because she's putting significance into all these different examples. And again, the voice exists in here as well. If you look at it's kind of weird. It's all one paragraph, but it's cut off because of the break off in the online version. But if you look at that second section there, there's a part where the author writes, more importantly, the hidden feeling conjuring up in the minds of the audience is, if they can do it, we can too. And this author does such a good job understanding how an audience would receive information and this speech altogether that she basically characterizes and role plays a little bit of how they would think, things they would say, and so forth, and a lot of exclamation in there as well to kind of like add again their own voice of optimism and encouragement. Really good choiceage, good writing altogether. And the last body paragraph, again, it's another good transition of chronology in the topic sentence itself. Topic sentence writes, having brought forth the continued struggle for women's rights and enlightening her audience with their potential by showing them the acts of others like them. Again, she's alluding to the previous paragraph, right? Albright begins her final push for action. So even though there's a little bit of push for action in the first two paragraphs, this one here is where she's really talking about the final nail in the coffin, the final push for actual change and all that. Maybe not super specific in terms of what they have to do, but Albright is suggesting that action has to come beyond the limits that are placed before them. So this author in this paragraph deals a lot with syntax and different uses of repetition or anaphora and so forth that Albright uses. And this is something that the author of this piece does a really good job once more of doing, of characterizing the audience and also interpreting their mindset here. If you look at the last little bit of this paragraph where it says, and of course, author writes, and of course, after hearing America's continual work in the struggle of women abroad, the graduates say to themselves, yes. It is this yes that Albright wants, a yes that confirms to each audience member that they will fight for gender equality, a yes that symbolized the beginning of an endless journey to achieve in the face of opposition. Wow, that is really sophisticated because it is rhetorical analysis beyond, where they're able to kind of envision the success of this speech and how this author is now giving that success through their validation, through their assessment, and so forth. It gives the writer of this work so much more ethos because now it shows that they actually understand a speech writer's or just writer's mentality and objectives. And then the last part of it is it's not a big deal because it's kind of a mini conclusion because all the body paragraphs are really well written, but otherwise this one restates the contents of the speech, but even that, not so much. It actually just captures the sentiments of the speech rather than all the little stuff that the author had already covered here. And it speaks about what the audience should or will take away, very much like they did in the other body paragraphs. So in this last conclusion, it does a little bit better of a job than our traditional like summary wrap up type conclusions, because it talks about the next steps or what could happen in the future and all that there. So this one, if you want to learn rhetorical analysis or have a better example to base your own writing off of, this is the one to look at, because this author in a short time was really able to write something sophisticated and complex, on the spot.